of the Budget Committee. Tonight we're here to basically provide you with an overview of the proposed fire station. With us here tonight is Jonathan Hawley from Warren Street Architects and Preston Hunter. Preston Hunter from Ekman Construction, as well as several others from Ekman, which I'll defer to Preston to introduce. We've put together a PowerPoint presentation that we'll kind of go through, and then we're each going to take different parts. What we wanted to go over tonight is the need for a new station, what we're proposing, the projected costs, the financing methods, and then obviously open it up for questions and answers. So, with that, need for the new station. The community has changed, but the fire station really hasn't. It was built in the 1950s by volunteers at no cost to the community. At the time, there was approximately a dozen members of the fire department, and they handled mostly truly fires and a few medicals. Currently, we have, there's been 2 additions over the years. Go ahead, the next one, Preston. Which are represented here. So the original station is the peak roof that you see to the left of the 2 frames. The first addition on that basically ended about where the back side of that truck is on the right picture. And then the third addition basically was to add that additional bay, and that was done in 1979, and then added a hose tower, which is the taller component you see in the very back of the building. That's no longer in use because of it's in violation of Department of Labor regulations, so it had to be locked and secured so that it cannot be used. That was like 3 years ago. Currently, the department, as I mentioned earlier, in this era that we're looking at here on the left, the initial building, was about 12 firefighters, firemen back then. In the mid-70s, they added on the additional bays to fit the 4 trucks you see there. And then again, in 79 was the additional bay when the first custom fire truck was purchased and delivered in 1980. Currently, the department has 2 full-time staff that work Monday through Friday, 8 to 4, 2 part-time staff, myself, and a part-time fire inspector, and then approximately 34 on-call firefighter EMTs. About 55% of our calls are medical, but we are now what's known as an all-hazards fire department, meaning we don't just go to fires and medicals. We deal with hazardous materials, we deal with motor vehicle accidents, we deal with technical rescues, water rescues, and we deal with, unfortunately in this day and age, the outcome of potentially terrorist incidents, hostile situations, and so forth. So we've really come a long way since those days, and quite honestly, I wish we were back in those days, but we're not. It's the world we live in today. The current station houses 5 vehicles, 3 engines, a tanker, and a rescue. 8 additional vehicles, pieces of resources, are housed outside. 2 forestries, a utility, a boat, a light tower, command vehicle, an inspector's vehicle, and the special operations trailer. The current station, go back one. Current station has significant code issues, 88 accessibility issues, and we'll get in more into depth in those in a little bit. But obviously lacks the necessary space for the equipment that the town owns currently. And from an energy efficiency standpoint, it's non-existent as far as energy efficiency. Go ahead forward. Just a little bit of a graphic. In 1959, it was approximately 700 residents. In 2017, now 2018, we're approaching 9,000. Interestingly enough, we had the 4th, which I didn't realize, 4th largest growth percentage change in New Hampshire with the growth between 1970 and 2015. and the estimated population in 2016 is 8,366 residents, as compared to about 700 back in 1959 when the fire station was built. And as I mentioned earlier, back then, 12 members. Good. We've also seen a growth in school population. Obviously, a good school system tends to draw families and increases the population and service demands. Since that fire station was built, we've also added several schools to the community. One of the reasons that in 1985, the community added full-time coverage when the 2 full-timers were hired in July of 1985 because of the daytime responses, particularly to protect the schools and the children in the schools. And those 2 firefighters, there's still 2 today. Annual calls for service. Obviously, back in 1959, there were a lot less people, a lot less things going on, and obviously a lot less calls for service. In 2000, we just ended the year at 653 requests for emergency requests for service. And I'll clarify, emergency being somebody dialed 911. That doesn't include inspections, non-emergency type services provided, and so forth. 653 emergency incidents in 2017. Approximately 1,700 more than when was planned on when the facility was built. The existing station, when it was built, was probably in the center of the populated part of town, being Charles Bancroft, Route 3A. The center of town really wasn't built out until later. Obviously, Albuquerque Ave back in even the 80s was split. You couldn't go from one end to the other as we do today. And you had your pockets of neighborhoods, as you kind of see here highlighted in the green. The goal is to be on scene as quick as possible, obviously within 4 to 6 minutes. There are parts of town we can do that now, and we'll get into some more mapping that was and time estimations that was done by National Regional Planning Commission for the benefit of the town. The Liberty Way, proposed Liberty Way site would put us in much better proximity to the built-out areas, current built-out areas of town than where we are now on Charles Bancroft. In 2015, late 15, I believe it was, the Board of Selectmen commissioned a feasibility study on the current station to assess code issues, the ability or possibility of adding on to that station, renovating that station, and a study was done. It's been out in the public domain now since I believe July of 16. And certainly is available online through the web page created for the fire station, as well as on the town's web page. And to speak more specifically to that, I'll ask John to come forward and speak to the results of the feasibility study conducted by Warren Street.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. My name is Jonathan Hawley. I'm with Warren Street Architects. We did, let me back up. I've been involved with the fire station proposal now since 2004. And we've had the pleasure of working with several chiefs along the way. I want to start by saying that ultimately the station that we're going to show you tonight is essentially the same station that was originally proposed in 2004, except for the one provision where trends today take all of the gear out of the apparatus bay, so we made the administration building about 1,000 square feet bigger. So I want to go back to the study and talk a little bit about that, and I'm going to hit just the highlights and answer any questions that you might have. In 2016, we did a thorough investigation of the existing building, and ultimately the proposal there was that we could accommodate a maximum of about 8,000 square feet, a modest addition, and then the renovation costs were budgeted at roughly $2 million. The building's 50 years old. It was built by volunteers, and as the chief has mentioned, it's not currently in the optimal place or response times to where the majority of the population is within Litchfield anymore. There are existing vehicles and trailers that are still stored outside. More than half of the equipment is outside. The overhead doors are too short, if you will, for the vehicles that are stored there. And looking forward, the trends are that fire apparatus are getting shorter and taller. So the provisions here moving forward would be that any equipment bought would have to be a special order. There are many life safety and building code violations within the building. A fire station is essentially an S1 use. It's a garage. That is supposed to be fire separated from any other space in the building, the administration on the second floor. The existing building is, I don't want to ever say impossible, but nearly impossible to fire separate the existing garage from the second floor administration, the way that it's built. The building is also built out of concrete block and filled with vermiculite. Vermiculite is a substance that was used for insulation back in the day, and 9 times out of 10, it contains asbestos. The way that the block was built, it would be very difficult to abate that. So in the sense of using any sort of federal monies or where we would be required to abate it and we couldn't abate it, it precludes a lot of things that we might look there. The second floor is not handicap accessible. It does not have a second means of egress. The fire escape on the outside is no longer allowed per building code. The interior stair does not meet rise run. And in terms of planning for the future, building up is not an option, because we did look at the structure that exists today, and because of how it was built and the current codes nearly 60 years later, the structure below, the concrete block, the foundations and everything don't support an additional floor or going further forward. So even though we made a proposal to, our mandate for the study was to see what we could build out on that site, we did make a comparison in 16 to the original 2004 plan that was proposed. And I want to be upfront, we simply took that set of documents that was, at that time, more than 12 years old, and we went back in our records, did an escalation of inflation over time, and came up with a $2.5 million number. So in 16, we were comparing what would it cost to build the building that was designed 12 years earlier, and versus renovating. It was a $2 million to $2.5 million number. Now, the thing that $2.5 million number does not take into account, it doesn't take into account site work, because the thought was we were just comparing those apples to apples. So when we look at the overall comparison to what we're proposing today, there's additional site costs. I need to back up a second here because I'm getting ahead of myself. So I want to go back and restate that in 2004, we designed a 5-bay station. In 2008, and then again in 2012, when that same proposal came before the voters, that station had been reduced to 3 bays. So when we were comparing the numbers in 16, it was to the last 3-bay proposal. This proposal that we have now is the original proposal that was done in 2004, which is a 5-bay, which brings all of the equipment that the town owns and puts it under a roof. If you take inflation for the 2016 comparison, it puts that build at about $2.7 million. You add the 1,000 square feet, you add the 2 additional bays, and we're just shy of the actual proposal, $4 million, which this building has been priced by Ekman, and Ekman is going to explain that a little bit further. Another big part of the existing building was that programmatically, the fire department operates very differently today than it did in 1950. And as we try to study how we might expand that building on site, it just came to fruition that we could not programmatically meet the needs of the fire department the way that the existing building was structured. There's also a separate issue which the town needs to discuss as to whether or not, moving forward with the proposal today, as to what's the disposition of that existing property, the sale of that property, if the town decides to sell that property. So there could be some income that is recouped from that. So let me talk a little bit about the proposal. So the picture on the right looks at the stair. The rise run of the stair is not correct. The handrails are not correct. The stair is not enclosed to the outside, so from a building code standpoint, the only egress of the building is completely non-compliant. I don't know if you've got a couple of slides you want to flip through. That is where the public enters. They enter directly into the apparatus bays, and then they go up this open stair that you see on the right-hand side to the administrative offices on the second floor. Not only is there vertical separation issues and vertical height issues, but because of the way that the garage is constructed, the width of the garage, you cannot open the doors of the vehicles completely on either sides of the building, and in the center, when you open those doors, they hit each other. So it's a very confined space. The site is conflicted with, it shares with the church and the Historical Society building to the right. One of the big issues with emergency vehicles coming and going is there's always the conflict of vehicles and pedestrians, and in terms of design today, we try to isolate that. We try to isolate the emergency vehicles in one path and the public in another path. Here you have the same curb cut to the road, so you've got people coming in and using the church or coming to use the town building, the historic building, basically entering right at the apron of the existing firehouse. And there's no way to modify that. It just simply isn't. This is the back of an apparatus bay. You can see that all of the gear is stored, all of the firefighters' gear is stored inside the apparatus bay, which is something that you don't do today. They have absolutely no room. Go ahead.
So I'll hit on this. This picture is actually very recent. It's from an incident last winter on Muscovy Drive. This hose all came back after it thawed out. It's laying there because it actually had to thaw out before we could put it back on the truck. The ladder that you see there had to be brought back, extended as it is because it froze. It actually had to be laid out overnight underneath the apparatus because that's the only place we had it. But the bigger challenge is hose that needs to be repacked onto these trucks has to be done outside because there's not enough. You'll see it in a minute in a picture. There's barely enough room for an average person to lay on top of the trucks without their back hitting the ceiling right there. The hose goes basically underneath where he's lying in the hose bed. So that means that hose has to be packed outside. That particular night, it was 2 degrees? 2 degrees. 2 degrees with 20 to 30 mile an hour winds. So we had a wind chill of well below zero. And that's after firefighters have been out in those conditions for 4 to 5 hours. That's just a recipe for an accident and an injury. So that's one of the other challenges that we face with the space constraints.
You're looking at some structural issues here. The ceiling's cracked, the CMU block, which is unreinforced masonry.
That picture on the bottom left is actually the center post in the fire station.
So that moves us to the proposal that we have at hand. In about a year after the study was completed in 16, selectmen voted to move forward with this proposal on the land adjacent to the town hall. So in early October, we reached out, did an RFP, solicited proposals for construction managers. Ekman Construction was hired on the basis of a positive affirmative vote of the voters at town meeting. Since that time in October, Warren Street has been working on, we've completed a full set of working documents, construction documents, full architecturals, electrical, mechanical, plumbing, structurals, that Ekman has put an estimate to, and that's what he's going to talk to you about tonight. So the design is complete, the permitting is complete, and I think we're actually shovel-ready at this point, subject to funding being available. Jump ahead to the next slide.
If I can just, on that, this is just the recent, and one of the things I think that's important to note is, as John said, Warren Street's been involved for almost 2 decades now, probably a little more than that. Ekman came on board back in October. That was after we actually solicited construction management companies. We received 6 companies that were interested in working on the project. We did, Troy and I were provided the information by Warren Street. We scored them individually. We then interviewed the top 4 companies. We also had members of the community. It was Troy, myself, the deputy, John, and we had 3 members of the community that sat in. Tom Young, at the time, was the planning board chair. Renee Thoreau and Rich Lasalas sat on and helped us interview based on backgrounds, their backgrounds in the construction field. And after a full afternoon of interviewing the 4 companies that finished in the top 4 out of the 6, we unanimously selected Ekman as the construction manager to move forward. So they didn't. There was a method to the madness, if you will, on how we arrived at where we're at today, and how Ekman was selected and so forth. Warren Street, having the history, was the board's decision to continue using them because they had the historical information, and quite honestly, the town had paid for a lot of engineering over the years through Warren Street. So that's where we're at today.
So what's being proposed today? The location, as I mentioned, is the parcel directly to the right of Town Hall, which would exit onto Albuquerque. Puts us really in the center of the population of Litchfield today. And there was, and the chief can speak to this, there was a response time study done separately that indicates that this really is the most prominent and purposeful location for the new station.
I realize this map on the left is probably a little bit almost virtually impossible to read. However, it is on the website, and if you click on it, it'll blow it right up. You can zoom in and read it very, very easily. And this, again, was all done by Nashua Regional Planning.
So the proposal today took a couple of turns as we began to develop from the schematic to the construction documents. Board of Selectmen gave us the charge to look at making sure that the fire station was designed in such a way to accommodate if and when a police station were ever added to the facility, in other words, to become a public safety complex. So as you can see, just, do you have a pointer?
I was just going to ask him that.
Yeah. Little red button. So that being the fire station, this piece of land right here has been programmed for a future police station, and this parking lot would continue and connect internally to the town hall station. But this is the proposal for the fire station today. So a couple of changes that took place. We were asked to redesign the administrative end of the building to accommodate shared space with a police department. We were to look at the site plan to accommodate the expansion of a police department in the future where they might have Sallyport access and outside storage. We also, at the direction of the fire department, took a look at the fact that in 2004, the gear was stored in the apparatus bay. So the building did get about 1,000 square feet bigger than the 2004 proposal, where there are actually separate vented a room now with washroom, et cetera, that stores the gear, the firefighters' gear separately. We opted to go forward with the 5-bay drive-through station. The station going from 3 bays to 5 bays added roughly 2,800 square feet. And as I mentioned, the administrative core, which I think there's a floor plan.
Next one.
So if you will, here's your 5-bay drive-through. This is the administration wing. The building's been reorganized in this area to allow for, this is an emergency ops center, training room, which can be accessed by the public from one side, locked off from the back where the police department might be, locked off from this side where the fire department is, have access to the front entryway with a private bathroom. So as a community room, as an emergency ops center, it could be used by the Boy Scouts, it could be used by the community after hours, and it's locked off from the actual functions, if you will, of both the fire department and the police department. In the future, if the police department is ever added in this location, it has the ability to share the central kitchen, if you will. It has the option of potentially using the bathrooms. It's been reorganized to allow for circulation to go directly through this office space and a building to be added onto the fire bank. So from a site standpoint, essentially other than, if you go back to the 2004 proposal, the only thing that we've done is we've added 16 feet of space in this link right here between admin and the fire apparatus bays. The building was always conceived as a 5B wood construction, asphalt shingles, cement board or vinyl siding. It remains the same as the current proposal today. So there's been nothing, this is a very modest fire station. It's not overbuilt by any means. It puts all of the equipment under one roof. When we went back to design, to do the engineering for the building, because the original plans were done more than 10 years ago, we had the engineers relook at power and lighting. Lighting today is all LED lighting. All the equipment is different. So that has been totally upgraded. There is IT communications in the building, and we have conduit that connects to the town hall that allows for future connection both from the fire department and the police department to the town hall. We've included a full generator that is call it a whole house. It will run the entire fire station. That's an additional element to what was originally budgeted. And we've included the relocation of the communication tower in that budgeting. So there's some components, as well as furniture, fixture, and equipment that basically is needed for within the building. The mechanical systems were all upgraded from what was originally designed. Everything is high-efficiency boilers. The apparatus bays are proposed to be radiant heat, which allows for, you bring equipment in late at night in the middle of the winter, things to dry off, and so it's truly a state-of-the-art station at this point. And I think that ends me, and I think, Preston, you're going to talk a little bit about costs.
Can I just ask, if you can just explain, just for everybody who's watching this, what a construction manager is and how that differs from other ways that it might, we might go forward?
Well, let the construction manager do that.
That's what I figured. This is a perfect segue into why.
So once again, my name is Preston Hunter. I'm a vice president at Ekman Construction. I also have with me John Reel. He's our chief estimator, and Matt Walsh is our project manager who'll be working on this project. So to answer your question, Ekman is a general contractor, and we also perform work as a construction manager and a design builder. So the construction management process is one that's used by many towns. for municipal projects such as this, both schools, police stations, fire stations, and other public projects. What it does is it allows our company to get involved before the project is, typically before the project is completely designed, although at this point we were coming in later in the design process. So we will use our expertise, both in-house and relationships with subcontractors and suppliers and knowledge of the current market conditions to establish guaranteed maximum price proposals. And this is a cost estimate that is commonly used as the basis of a bond vote. It is important to note that's a component of the overall project cost, and we can talk about that later. What's unique about the construction management approach is after the project passes, the project is bid out by Ekman to all qualified subcontractors and suppliers. It's a very transparent process, so the chief, the town administrator, whomever's on the building committee is involved with that process, and we function really as a consultant. We're responsible for all of the supervision of the project, all of the administration of the project, and ensuring that everything is built in accordance with the plans and specifications that the architect does. Our compensation is a percentage fee, so we are working for you, and at the end of the project, if there's unused funds, they're returned to the town. So that, in a nutshell, is what a construction manager does. The traditional old way of doing a hard bid is still done in some cases, but you miss out on the opportunity of having the construction company involved earlier in the project to help establish an accurate budget. Okay, great. Okay. So I wanted to just share with you a little bit about what we've done since we were brought on board in October, give you a little bit of an insight into the methodology that we've used to arrive at the construction portion of the overall project cost. As Jonathan had indicated, we received a complete set of documents, which was issued for pricing towards the end of November. This is actually somewhat unique. Many towns that go through this process are at more of a schematic design level, which maybe there's 3 or 4 sheets, and we're required to fill in the blanks and come up with a number that the project can eventually be built for. In this case, we had about 60 pages of plans. So, as Jonathan had mentioned, all of his engineering consultants and others that were involved with designing it had updated their plans and added a great amount of detail. So that allows us to be more accurate with the project pricing. So those documents included the site plans, the architectural plans, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing plans as well. So initially, the way our estimating department works is we'll go through all of the documents and sort of do an initial coordination review to make sure that there aren't any conflicts and that we understand exactly what the design intent is. John Reel and his estimators are renowned for coming up with questions and really getting into the details. I'm sure this project was no different, but we had a lot of dialogue with Warren Street initially to make sure that we were very clear on what the scope of work was. After that point, the documents were actually sent out to over 30 qualified local subcontractors and suppliers to assist us with the budgeting process. That's an important part of this to ensure that we are getting current, accurate pricing from subcontractors that we trust. This is not a bid scenario. Those subcontractors that participate will certainly be invited to bid along with others as well. However, this helps us confirm our own internal estimates and brings the insights as well of other professionals in the trades to the estimating process. Once that information is received, we also apply current pricing that we have based on projects that we're currently constructing or ones that have been recently completed or bid. Apply those to quantities that John and his team have calculated from the documents that were presented, were provided to us. And we'll fill in all of the other blanks as far as costs go with regards to other areas where we didn't receive subcontractor involvement. We met with the chief and the town administrator very end of the year. I think it was just before New Year's. And we reviewed those cost estimates, and we confirmed. We went through a process of basically coordinating our budget and what we had included based on the documents with the owner's budget, the soft costs, to ensure that everything was covered and only covered once. So there are often items that can either show up in the owner's side of the budget or the construction budget, and we went through that process to make sure that we had all of the costs accurately accounted for. So the end result was a building construction cost of $4 million. That includes any other associated costs that can be attributed to the vertical construction. Site work construction costs amounted to a little under $790,000. That also included, as Jonathan had alluded to, some additional infrastructure that would enable you to do an addition in the future, have utilities in place to more or less plug and play a future addition should the town choose to do so. And then the third and final component of the overall project cost, as I mentioned before, is the project soft costs. These are the owner budgeted costs, and those were calculated at $679,500. So that brings your total project cost into the sums to $5,469,000.
Can we just go back one
Yeah,
for a second?
sure.
So just, I guess, to give a little bit of an idea of the project soft costs, about $150,000 of that is to move our communications equipment, construct a new tower at the new site. Because of the elevation, that tower could have to be anywhere between 150 and 160, 130 and 160 feet tall. So that's about $150,000. It's not part of the building project, but it is part of the town's side of it. It also would include moving equipment that we currently have, the exhaust system that's in the current station that was put in, and expanding that system because it's going from five vehicles to 10. It includes moving compressors, moving cascade systems, which is what we fill our self-contained breathing apparatus with. Those are bigger items, heavy items. They can't just be picked up with a dolly and moved. They have to be professionally moved, as well as washer extractors, those type of larger items. And then there's costs in there to basically furnish the building, because there's very little that we would have to take forward because the current station is mostly counters and not really desks and chairs and so forth, so. Just to give you an idea of what some of that soft cost items are.
So I think Troy's going to talk about financing.
So what we did, once we received the estimated cost from Ekman, we reached out to the New Hampshire Municipal Bond Bank. They're one product that we could use to finance the project. We've also learned that there's companies out there that we could look for private financing. Some of the companies that we've used in the past that we've done lease purchasing of our vehicles actually finance some municipal projects, and we hear that the interest rates are competitive through that process. So, we'll be looking at all the different financing that's available. But primarily, the New Hampshire Municipal Bond Bank, community our size, usually will work with them. All the towns and schools and county governments will pool together their bonds, and the whole group bidding of the financing hopefully gets a really good competitive rate. So the interest rates that are provided here, they're a conservative rate. The rates are always changing, but this is what we're using for budget estimates. There's two types of bond that you can choose to use. We have the level principal and the level debt. The level principal is essentially just that. You pay the same principal amount for the term of the bond. And you'll see that in the schedules that the the payments actually decrease each year. So I don't know what the last bond payment the town had with the school, if you had, if you noticed that the bond payment actually decreased every year.
It did.
And a lot of towns like to use that method because obviously every year there's a little growth in the operating budget. And so as you retire $30,000 of bond debt, you know, there's always $30,000 of new expense, usually with union contracts or whatever, cost of living. So that is one form to look at. The other one that's a lot of towns like is the level debt. The level debt is exactly that. That's going to be a stable cost from the, you know, the payment will be the same from the start of the loan to the end. Give or take a few $1,000s. I mean, they got, you know, but it's pretty stable, it's level. So that, you know, we threw some options out here. The board's not in a position right now where it's able to make a recommendation as where we think we should go. We're hoping that we get some input from the Budget Committee and from the hearing Thursday night. Obviously, you could take a look at a 15-year financing package and, you know, just really try to get this project up and running, get it paid for. We know we have other capital projects that are going to be needed in the community, so try to take care of this cost as quick as we can. Another argument is this building is going to meet the needs of the town for, I want to say, at least 50 years.
We would hope.
We hope. And, you know, if the residents that are in town today are going to finance that a lot of communities like to finance that cost as they would purchasing a home, you know, looking at a 30-year or 25-year financing plan. If the resident lives in town for 5 years, they pay their fair share towards that cost. If they leave, they no longer pay it. The new person coming in picks up that cost. So there's pros and cons of looking at the different, you know, financing terms and the two different notes. A lot of people sometimes, you know, will take a look at just the interest, the amount of interest that you pay, and that has a big factor on their decision-making. So it really, there's no right or wrong. Every town and school does it, whatever really fits into their financial plan, and how much, you know, of a tax impact they want to take on for the term of the note.
And at that point, are we open for questions?
Well,
Couple things, just to go, before we open. Preston referred to getting estimates from contractors. One of the things that the town did do is retain the right to assist and select the contractors. So, and for that reason, if there's contractors in town that want to be part of this project, they can be. Provided they can accomplish the scope of work. It's not solely limited to contractors that currently work for Ekman. We did make it a condition that if a local contractor wants to do part of the job, and they can obviously meet the scope of work, that they would be considered for the project. One thing we didn't cover under any of this is, and I know it's a question that's out there, is grant funding, other sources of revenue for this project. There are no grants out there for the whole station. There was a number of years ago some federal money. That's how Londonderry built their new station up by the airport on Harvey Road. That was paid for under federal funds because it basically is sitting right there at the edge of the airport. However, there is some funding through the state Homeland Security to offset some of the costs of outfitting and equipping the Emergency Operations Center, which would also be beneficial to the community because it's tables, it's chairs, it's a projector like we're looking at right now, that some of those costs can be offset through Homeland Security money, because the town would be using it as an Emergency Operations Center, warming center during cold, warming or cooling, depending on time of year, and potentially a shelter. So some of those costs, but we're not talking, you know, $1 million or $2 million in we're talking probably $100,000 to $200,000 in grant funding. And it's matching funding, but the cost of the building would be our match. So, and I've spoken with several colleagues that have been successful at getting somewhere in the vicinity of $150,000 through Homeland Security. For the generator could be one thing. We talked about the whole house generator, if you will. That is one item that a good chunk of that could be covered and then would be backed out of the budget. But it has to be in the budget in order to, one, apply for the grant, and two, secure the funding. So with that, if there's any questions.
Actually, I got a couple. The first one is the number for 20 years level debt tax impact, is that correct?
These are the numbers that I received from the New Hampshire Municipal Bond Bank, and it was brought up last night by the Board of Selectmen. I'm going to double check that just to make sure, but I did double check this morning. It's the numbers that are on the schedule, so
Doesn't make much sense.
I understand.
The next one I have is, and you just mentioned the generator. The generator that you're pricing out right now, is that going to be large enough if the police department were to be added on?
No.
Or would that have to be a separate?
There's no way, no, I mean, there's no way to figure what they can use, and there's no way to tie it across. It'd be a separate electrical entrance.
And the last question I had, when you talk about the, exactly what it's called, soft cost, and as far as moving that equipment, how long is that, will it take you to move that equipment? I take it you'd be shut down during that time, correct?
No, that's one, that's actually a very good question. That was one of the challenges that when Jonathan referred to, if we did anything at the current site, programmatically, yes, that could be an issue, but because we're basically gonna get in the apparatus and move it to a new building, where the items, the only critical item is the communications, and that we will have to build a short-term redundancy for. The benefit is of being dispatched by Hudson. It won't impact our ability to be dispatched during that day or so. It may just create some challenges with on-scene, intertown communications. But obviously, the company that would be doing it has the ability to provide a temporary setup for that time frame.
So my question is, we were told that one of the things, a big thing impacting costs was the hurricane season and how building material was in high demand, which was impacting the cost, making the cost higher. So how much of that is a factor in the 5.5 million? And as we go forward, the spring, July, fall, and we're now bidding and building piece at a time, what impact is that going to have? Assuming costs are lower, and we don't spend the full 5.5 million, what happens to the what's left over?
Tackle that, Preston.
Sit up here, or I don't know if we
If
need
you
to
just-
the microphone,
just-
or?
Yeah, need a
I'll
microphone.
just huddle around here. So, there is a small contingency, also part of of the figures that we showed, which could absorb those kind of fluctuations in material costs. As far as what happens with unused funds, it's up to the town to decide what they would like to do with that money, but essentially, the project gets billed for the cost that we receive, and at the end of the project, if there's more money left over, 100% gets returned to the town.
So would it be safe to say that we expect the 5.5 million is worst-case scenario, and that as time goes on, we see building materials decreasing, or are we going to see maybe even an increase in building materials?
The 5.5 is a guarantee maximum price.
So knowing that there have been a number of towns in southern New Hampshire that have done fire stations and safety complexes in the last couple of years, how do we compare price-wise to that?
Yeah, that's a difficult question to answer because no two fire stations are the same, no two sites are the same. We're doing a project in Plastow right now, which is a police and fire station, but it's an addition and renovation. So, the portion of the building that's remained becomes fire station, and they're adding a police station, and that's an $8.5 million total project cost. But it's every site is different. We saw around $750,000 in site. Some projects may have a site that's cleared and ready to go. It's just a sand pit. We did a project in Milton, the fire station in Milton, not too long ago that had a site that was, had very low site costs. So those kind of things can have a significant impact on the overall project cost.
Yeah, but what about just the building cost, right? Because the building cost is $4 million, so
Yeah.
that should be pretty comparable.
And that depends a lot on size, the number of apparatus bays you have, the number of office space, the mechanical, electrical, plumbing systems, the building structure itself. So it's not something that's as easy to compare as you might think. If it was a Target or a Walmart or something, you can really do a very good comparison. But, that being said, the costs are not out of line with what we're seeing. We have taken apart the design and priced everything individually, so we didn't start, at that, 10,000-foot view. That was the methodology we used.
I guess I was a little stunned at the cost per square foot for construction. If you look at the all-in price, it's $430.69 per square foot. That just seems astronomical for construction of a building that's basically a big open space with garage doors for the Bay Area. And then office space. You're really building two distinct buildings, as you described. You're building an office space.
A big garage.
And you're building a big garage with 10 doors on it. And you need a certain amount of height, and I get all that. I'm stunned at $430 a square foot all in with no breakdown of the costs. To tell me it's $4 million, that's a really round number that tells me somebody said, 4 million's a good number. I'd prefer to see, to be prepared to vote, a breakdown of costs. Here's what it costs for the office space, here's what it costs for the bay space, here's what it is for mechanical systems, here's what it is for foundation. That's typically what the committee's seen on prior construction projects.
We can certainly give you a better idea of what some of the cost drivers are for the project. This facility is not a big garage. It's easy to sort of simplify it to that level, but it's a critical facility that has a lot of advanced systems in it. As Jonathan mentioned, it is truly a state-of-the-art first responding emergency response facility. So, could you build a fire station cheaper? Absolutely. You could get a pre-engineered metal building and do it for significantly less dollars. It's not the same building. So the costs that we've shared reflect the 66 pages of design that's been done, and the month of work that went into that is something that's very difficult to present in a public setting. So I appreciate your interest in understanding more of the details, and that's something that we'd be happy to share in more of a non-public session, to be honest with you, because one of the challenges we have is this project has not gone out to bid yet. And whereas we're hired as the consultant for the town, we have to make sure that we're in a position to negotiate the best prices on all of the different trades. So there's a certain logic to not sharing what all of those line item budget items are with the community at large.
Preston, if I may?
Yeah.
In terms of, it's not a round number. I will tell you that Ekman has done a thorough estimate of the entire building. It was at my urging in early December not to put this out to bid. And the reason being is, honestly, our office right now has a little more than $100 million worth of construction ongoing today. I had in in November and December, I had 6 projects go out to bid, and all of them came back with single quotes. Some projects came back, we couldn't get an electrical number, we couldn't get a concrete number. The atmosphere today is that the economy has taken off. Every contractor that's worth his weight in anything is busy. And you are at a point where they were coming through a year where they were very busy, and at the end of the year, they're trying to wrap up their summer slammers, they're trying to wrap up their end of year. They don't want any more work. They're not thinking about working. They're thinking about taking a few days off around Christmas with their kids, and the attitude is, if I want the job, I'll throw a stupid number at it. If I get it, great, it's a Christmas present. I didn't want, that number would have been $6.5 or $7 million if we put this out to bid in December. So the selectmen heard my cry, and basically I warned them of this, and I said, look, Ekman has the ability to price this based on market trends today. They're going to give you a GMP, that's a guaranteed maximum price based on them. You get the savings. Let's wait until end of January, February, when everybody's come off the rush of the holidays, when they're looking for summer work. That's the time to bid this job. And that's when so the idea here though now is we're going to wait till town meeting. If it passes, the day after it passes, this goes out on the street, and we will get very competitive numbers. And the town is the one that gets the benefit of that. So I don't want you to think that, somebody threw a number at. John Reel has driven me crazy for a month. There's 60 pages of questions, and how many screws in here, and how many pieces of pipe there. It's, believe me, he's pulled it apart and put it back together.
I guess what's going to be a challenge is the state use of the state-of-the-art, because that's typically not what this town has experienced in the past. I'm not saying it's a wrong way to go, but I'll just say that people will say, well, what does it cost if it's not state-of-the-art? Does it cost $1 million less? Does it cost $100,000 less? I can already see the people lining up to ask questions that it doesn't sound like there's going to be answers that will satisfy.
I think the challenge is, the last big project the town did was the town hall, 20 years ago or so. And that was exactly that tag. Let's make it as cheap as possible, and now we're suffering from it. We have no basement.
I'm not arguing it's right, John.
We have no basement, so we gotta make sure whatever we build now is gonna take us 25 years forward. And that's what this building is hopefully gonna do.
Carrie, I was going to say, you've got this background, so I'm interested in
Well, no, I
your questions.
appreciate what they have to say, and I think he's completely correct about the pricing, because just so you know, I was a project manager in Boston, so I completely hear the whole throw a number at it. If you like it, great, but if you don't, that's fine too. So I completely agree. My concern more is I think a lot of people voted for the design expecting a lot smaller number to come back. So my concern is we're going to put out a budget, and I'm sure your number is great for your plans. I'm just not sure that the plans are great for the community. I'm worried that people are going to see potentially I like to pay as little interest as possible, so my advocation would be for the 15-year level principal, get it over with and done with. So you're talking $200 to $240 for this, knowing that we have and Warren Street was involved in it's quite a bit of money that needs to be invested in the school, so you're talking another $200. So in the next couple of years, we can see $400 to potentially $600 worth of bond money being added to people's taxes. Is that something that people are really going to be interested in doing all at once? It's just, if we put together a state-of-the-art building that's going to take us 25 years, but it doesn't pass, then do we have to redesign? Do we end up, for another 5 years waiting for a building that answers us for 25 years? It's just, yes, I understand the concern, but I think there's a lot of things here in this town at once, and I'm concerned that the sticker price is going to scare people away. I'm really concerned that it's going to be a matter of why spend this much money when we can spend a little less and address 3 schools. It's just, I think you have a lot of competing interests, and people are going to be looking. Okay, there's no impact next year, but the following year, there could be a school vote. They're talking It's just, there's gonna be a lot hitting at once, and my concern is it's a lot to ask.
So we can't predict what might be on the warrants a year, 2 years, 5 years from now. But hindsight is 20/20, and in 2008, this project was projected to cost 1.9 million, and it hasn't gone down since 2008. So I'm not sure that waiting is going to buy us anything but increase costs.
Unless you go smaller and less state-of-the-art.
I would also say, I mean, there's all of the talk in town right now about this, but if people looked at those actual numbers, that doesn't look that bad to me.
That's on top of the other 600 that's increasing. So it's just, it adds
I
up.
pay my tax bill too, Carrie, I get it. It just, I don't think that there is any doubt that a fire station is needed. I think
Right.
that's a very compelling case, absolutely. The 5.5 million knocks me off my chair when I saw it too. To Cindy's point, I don't know that the costs are going to go down unless, I guess, there's a design change. So were there other designs that were considered?
No, we said, from the start of this project, last year when we, asked the citizens to approve this project, we raised enough money to update the existing plans. And so that's what we did. We just basically spent about another $100,000 on revising the old plans.
Right, so usually you get 2 of 3, scope, schedule, or cost. Was cost at all included when we looked at those designs? Because it kind of looks like we got schedule and scope. Cost is the one.
So I just want to address the quote-unquote state-of-the-art. This is a modest, it's wood frame, it's vinyl siding, it's asphalt shingles, it's wood trusses. In terms of when I talk of when the term was used, state-of-the-art, it was more that we sat with the fire department and said, how do you use this building? So it has a fill hose at the ceiling of the apparatus bay to fill the tanker while it's inside the building. It was things like that that I talk about that reduces the stress and the labor on the fire department side. But the building shell is about as modest as you're going to get. You're not going to take 10%. Could you take 10% of the cost out of the building? Sure, you're just going to make it cheaper.
Just reduce quality.
Yeah, we put a Modine heater in the garage and we don't do radiant heat. That's, something like that. But these are the numbers today of what things are costing.
And like I said, I understand that. I don't think your numbers are off for what this has been designed. My concern is you're going to end up in the same spot next year when people see that and say, no, then what do we do? So my concern is that the design's great, it addresses all your concerns, but I'm not sure how it's going to.
Well, as far as cutting down the scope of the building, what are your operational capabilities based on for the fire department? I mean, how many trucks you have, your EOC? There's got to be some kind of required operational capabilities or projected operational environment that you go to say this is what we need for a town this size, this is what we'll need 10 years from now.
Correct. So in the
Can I go with the flip then?
the insurance service office essentially is one of those criteria.
Yep.
NFPA standards play another big part. The town's ISO rating is based upon the ability to a number of things. It's based on communications, how a call is received, how quick it's transmitted, how it's transmitted. It's based on the ability to move water. In order to get the best rating, we have to be able we have to have the ability to pump 3,500 gallons of water a minute, hence 3 trucks. So then we're rated on 3 fire engines plus a reserve engine in case one's down in order to maintain the rating, which we have. NFPA standards dictate really safe operations and so forth, training levels. So the 3 engines in the tanker you see in the first 2 closest to those are what get us our ISO rating, more or less. The rescue is primarily for medical calls. That responds to every medical call that we have. As well as it also supports fire scene operations and other things. So nothing is really a single-use vehicle, if you will. The forestry vehicles are predominantly for the vast woods and fields we still have. Actually, one of them, which it's kind of in the fourth to the right bay in the back, I know you can't read it, but Bay 4 in the back, is on loan to us from the state. And I was just ironically informed today that we have to re-sign our agreement with the state for that vehicle. And one of the conditions of having that vehicle is that it's maintained and housed appropriately. I believe there was a picture in the presentation that shows it parked up in the highway garage, covered in snow. That's a violation of our loan agreement from the state for that vehicle. So it's that, I mean, there's a possibility to lose that vehicle.
So what you're saying is these 5 bays is really what you need,
That houses what we currently have for equipment and what the town has over the years
and this equipment,
established as its,
so this equipment is, the minimum is plus a little bit? Or is it in excess of the minimum requirement?
well, the town really sets the minimums, and this is what the town has had, and I'm going to defer to Deputy Nichol, because in my 6 years here, this is what the town has had. We've not added a vehicle in that 6 years. So this is what the town, through the years, has established as what it wants and expects for the abilities and capabilities of its fire department. And right now, 5 of them are housed, and the remainder are not.
Okay.
Now, a forestry vehicle, I'm sorry, a forestry vehicle right now is parked outside, but yet we utilize that during storms to go, you know, chase a wire down, chase a tree down, because it carries, you know, has the equipment, and we're not tying up a $500,000 fire engine to go cut a tree off Cutler Road. We're sending a forestry unit with a couple of people so that we're not tying up. So, I mean, just because it's a forestry doesn't mean it doesn't get used during the winter. Likewise, there's a lot of times those four-wheel drive vehicles are our primary means to get around during a storm type thing.
Right, so that covers the bays. So really, it sounds like all 5 bays are fully
Yep,
occupied.
and actually, so as you come in, can I have the point? Yep. How do I run this thing?
See the red button?
Red button. I want to point anyway. So this room right here is what we referred to earlier as the gear room. So all of the gear that is now hung around the station alongside the trucks would be housed in here. By current standards, that should be directly vented to the outside so that any type of contaminants that are on the gear, even after washing, are extracted to the outside and not within the building. This room right here is actually where the drying, washing is done here. So if you will, come back from a fire, gear goes into the washer. If the individual needs to get what we call decon, get contaminants off them, there's a shower right there for that to happen. Then the gear goes to the dryer. These 2 bathrooms appear to be big, but that's because they have about 25 lockers, small 1x1, 14x14 inch lockers, so that each individual can keep a change of clothes and a small bag of toiletries, so that if they do get contaminated, they can shower. There's a shower in each of these bathrooms, men's and women's bathrooms. They can shower and change before they go home and take any type potential contaminants, carcinogens, and so forth home. We don't have that right now. So we're working in that deficit right now. This is a medical equipment room. Right now, our medical equipment's stored in cabinets upstairs and some of it's downstairs. This would actually store it close enough to restock, as well as provide for security of medications and equipment. These basically are 3 offices. All work that's being done, would be done in here, is now being done at counters in the common area at the current station. This would be an inspection office with a common reception area coming in off the main entrance of the building here. This would be a room for the first level supervisors to do reports, to have a meeting with a firefighter, records, file storage, EMS, so medical reports could be done here again, can be secured for patient confidentiality type records. Basically, an office for the fire chief, an office for the deputy fire chief, small conference room, kitchen. which would support the community room, emergency operations center, and training room. This will fit 40 with tables and chairs and approximately 80 in a seating type, meeting type environment. And again, John had referred to a bathroom that supports this. So again, one of the things, and unfortunately in this day and age, police stations, fire stations need to be secured. We can't have people just walking through. Unfortunately, it's the world we live in. So this bathroom is there to support this room, so the budget committee could have their meetings here, and there wouldn't need to be anybody in the fire side of the building. You'd have access to the room, you'd have a bathroom, and even access to the kitchen if necessary. Thank you. And actually, the deputy just raised a good point. Right now, we don't have a training area. We're using the cable building, upstairs at the cable building, which is probably a little smaller than this room for 38 people.
A lot smaller.
Because they converted that into a studio. We approach the church, and we have the church hall for the 3 nights a month that we need, provided they don't need it. So we actually don't have this right now. We have nowhere to hold a training if, this time of year, unless we come and either use the auditorium, use a classroom here, or if the room at Town Hall is available. But now we're subjecting our vehicles to sitting outside for 2 to 3 hours while we do training off-site in the cold and so forth.
Okay. Then we talked about the building itself lasting for 25, 50 years, somewhere in there. With town growth, how much does this need to grow?
Well, I mean, interestingly enough, I reached out to,
I'll tell you, it might be better for Troy to answer. If we're looking at projected growth of the town, what additional capacity do we need in the fire department?
No, the chief would have to answer that, yeah, I'm sorry.
So depending on, as I understand, a couple of different scenarios for build-out, and max build-out is about 12,000 people. So we're not that far off. I actually was quite shocked. I thought it'd be a lot more. There's been a lot of questions about, well, this is going to drive full-time coverage. I can sit here as your fire chief and tell you, I don't see that down the road. Maybe 15 years down the road, but I don't see that right now. We have a vibrant 38-member department. We're fortunate. Many of my colleagues are struggling to get on-call firefighters. We've not in my 6 years had that issue. We lose 1 or 2, we have 1 or 2 people. We really haven't even done a true recruiting program. We just take them as they come, and we've stayed status quo. Very uncommon in today's day and age in the call-in volunteer fire service. There's been talk about an ambulance. While it may not look to be an empty bay, I'm sorry, now I see what everybody was kind of looking at flying around. With the addition, should we ever choose to have our own ambulance, then we would not have a need for the rescue, because the ambulance would go in place of the rescue, so the ambulance could take that spot right there. But again, I don't foresee that in the foreseeable future.
Okay, so at 12,000 people, this is sufficient.
This should suffice for the foreseeable future. I mean, I can't project, I don't think any one of us could, 20, 30, what the department will look like in 30 years. But at least for the foreseeable future, from a structure standpoint, there's adequate room for the foreseeable growth.
So if part of this is the result of population growth and the population distribution, is there an opportunity to use impact fees to offset the cost of this?
We have used pretty much all the impact fees to get us to this point.
Okay.
Paying for the engineering and architectural fees this summer to update the plans. So we have, right now, I don't know, $12,000 maybe they've come in.
All right, then the other offset, which had been raised, would be the plans for what we're going to do with the existing property. Would we consider selling? What would we do with that land?
That's been discussed. We've, right now, this seems like the most common sense use of that property would be, one, you could look at selling the property, and maybe, the church could have it, has a use for it, or maybe there could be a small business that could somehow operate out of it, but I think that there could be a good use of just storage for town storage. It could be, we've had discussions with some school officials. They've indicated that it's a possibility that they could use storage. We know that the rec department, fire could still, and police could use storage. We could store some of the records
On the first floor.
upstairs, or even on the first floor.
So if you
Being
do it upstairs
because-
with a crumbling column, what kind of retrofitting work would we necessarily need to invest in order to make it available to?
I wouldn't invest any money if we do storage on the first floor. Why would I make any investment in that building?
Well, that's my concern, that if we're going to use it for storage, we're going to find ourselves still heating it, still have to maintain it. One of the big arguments for a new
That's what you're
build,
storing it. It can be cold storage, you don't have to heat it.
somebody's going to have to go in there in the middle of the freezing cold, get a record and complain. They're going to have you're going to have pipes possibly bursting and destroying your records. There's still going to be maintenance. You're going to have to re-roof it, you're going to have to side it. There's still going to be ongoing costs associated with maintaining that facility. So if the reasoning for relocating this is we don't want to put more money into it, one of the ways to not put more money into it is to knock it down or sell it. Yeah, I would hate to see us say that we're trying to save money, but then still sink a ton of money into a building we shouldn't be sinking money into, all in the effort of saving money. It just doesn't, it's a circular argument.
No, I think all those options are on the table. I mean, that's one of the things we discussed, is that, you could demolish the building, you could raise it. There's some I think that'd be a discussion with the community, because that's sort of a historic area of the town. But that discussion could occur. I think right now, the most common sense approach would be for cold storage.
I don't think you can sell the building just because it's kind of landlocked to begin
No,
with.
you'd
Unless
sell
you
the land.
lease it out.
You'd have
tear
to
it down,
lease.
it out, because of the historic side of it, and we already own all that
So
land.
I think one way to make it more attractive is to lower the cost, and one of the ways to lower the cost is to, divest ourselves of property that's not meeting our needs. And so I would think that as part of this project, we really should consider what we're going to do with it. And without an answer to that, I don't know how many people are going to feel going forward.
Did we price out, it was 2004 with the original plans of 3-bay? So when we did, do you have any idea, like roughly how much less it would cost if you did a 3-bay instead of 5-bay?
If we eliminated
Yeah, because you can always add those on later on, correct?
Didn't in 2004,
So
it was
the-
also a substation?
So the 3-bay design was predicated on a second sub-fire station down, actually right down around here on Talent Road.
I'm saying
So
you-
that was where your additional 2 bays
football field, isn't
for the equipment came in, was a separate facility altogether. So yeah, you could cut 2 off, but we're going to have vehicles sitting outside.
You're going to have a few vehicles sitting outside, but it's going to give you the bays and the space that you need right now that you don't have. I mean, you can open the doors, the apparatus goes elsewhere. I'm just wondering, like, how much savings if you just cut 2 bays out right now,
Yeah.
then maybe adding them on later on?
John had gone through a quick exercise. It was like $280,000. It's not a huge chunk. The challenge is you still have to build the exterior wall, and that's one of the most expensive parts. And of course, when you add on to it, you'll be rebuilding that same exterior wall.
At significantly higher cost.
Yeah.
Is there a formal plan for the town or the fire department on communication? I mean, you have the website, of course, we have the ever useful Facebook, but how do you let the community in on this? Because, I mean, anyone that I've talked to and anything that I have read has been overwhelmingly, oh my God, $5.5 million. But then you sit here and you listen to everything that you guys present, and you understand the rationale behind it. I know you've got the budget hearing, but, I mean, the
bond hearing.
So, I mean, just as one response to that, so Ekman's put together that great website, which talks about the history, why, the needs, and it's really well laid out. Tonight, we are recording this session, and the plan is to take their slide deck with the video and put it all together and publish that also. We also published the original 2008 proposal, which is a lot of the same context you saw here is in that same proposal. And people are watching it, and they're looking through it. So people are beginning to be educated on the needs, and I think that's going to help. But I think we're just going to continue pushing it out there. And, I know the chief and Ekman has other plans involved in that, but we're going to keep on pushing it out as much as we can.
So
And-
tonight's meeting, how quickly can you get it up on,
My intent is to have it up by tomorrow night, if not sooner.
and is this presentation also going to be what's presented at the bond hearing on Thursday?
Yeah.
Okay, because I think this has been very, and Chief, when you went through and explained each bay and explained each room and what happens, that was very helpful too. And I think some of that personal stuff gets missed when it's just something you look at on a website. I think that's really helpful to understand why these things are here and what they're going to be used for.
And again, you reference, for those that are watching now, Litchfield Fire, www.litchfieldfirestation.com. Pretty much all the information that you've seen tonight is on that webpage. It's updated on an almost daily basis. This particular image right here, again, while it's small on the page, if you click on any image, it will blow up and you can read every one of those labels on those rooms and understand why. And that actually, as of when we met, I think it was the last Friday of the year, that went live December 12th, I believe it was. That website had received about 2,500 visits, which from Ekman's IT folks was probably one of the best.
It's a lot of activity.
Activity levels that any of their websites have. So it's being viewed and visited, but to your point, Cindy, you're right. I mean, until you put an explanation with a given room and so forth, it's kind of hard to understand the complexity. And like I said, the training room, community room, it's going to be the biggest room that we have between town hall, any of the schools that, isn't a gymnasium or an auditorium. It's going to be bigger than the boardroom, depending again on, and it's going to be open to whatever community group needs it. So it's not just isolated to police and fire.
Is that going to be set up for cable also?
That would be, that's the intent.
That
I
is
mean,
So my last question is really as a community member and not as a budget committee member. So how are you going to address the concerns of your new neighbors, considering I personally will be one? So I hear 650 calls and 365 days a year. I'm thinking,
and they're all between midnight and 6.
so I'm thinking my kids are going to be woken up every night.
No, I mean, because first of all, exiting onto Albuquerque is a lot less busy than exiting onto 3A.
Don't you hit your sirens right away as soon as you're coming onto the road?
No, maybe one or two, but again, it's we subscribe to use it as necessary, not, so at 3 in the morning, no, they shouldn't be pulling out with the siren going. The lights are gonna be going, but again, if you're a real light sleeper, I guess, and you see the lights bouncing off the wall, then there might be some. We did not opt for any type of signaling, other than signage, because again, we don't have any type of signaling now, and Albuquerque is going to be a much less traveled road than exiting onto CBH.
Better sightline.
Yeah, much better sight line. Can we get back to the site plan? Sure. So as you kind of see it right here, this is Albuquerque right here, so I'm guessing you're right across the street.
Westview, 1.
So I mean,
You must hear the police.
We do.
yeah.
Yeah.
So,
But the sirens are almost never on.
yeah, and I,
Just the
again,
lights.
at 8 o'clock in the morning, yeah, you might, because of traffic.
Yeah, I don't care about it.
But at 2 o'clock in the morning,
Okay.
you shouldn't, that shouldn't be an issue, and if it is, we'll address it.
Honestly, on a
Quite quickly,
day-to-day
so.
basis, the two of us here that are full-time, we don't run the siren that much unless there's traffic that's not moving out of the way, and depending on what the call is.
But again, back to the sight line is much better. I mean, pulling out where this is, we're going to be able to see well past the intersection of Hillcrest and a fair distance south on Albuquerque. And this here is about 80 feet wide, 100 feet wide, the bay. So, you've got quite and actually somebody asked at the planning board meeting, it didn't appear quite as wide as the bays, and how would we get all 5 trucks out at the same time? We don't exit all 5 trucks at the same time. Even if they're all staffed, because of a training, we have a response protocol. So for the most part, most calls are the rescue. All medicals are the rescue. It's one truck, it's out fairly quick. None of them are overly loud from an exhaust or engine standpoint. You know, and if it's 2 or 3, they're gonna all go out, you know, and have a clear line of sight. So you shouldn't have a significant, there'll be no outside audio, at least during the night. I mean, there's no intent to put any outside right now. As we get in, we may need something on, you know, on the fringe of the building, but that, you know, we would certainly design that it had a cutoff at, you know, 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock, whatever it is at night, so if there's no outside audio.
I'll share that with my neighbors.
So, yeah, you know, we certainly want to be good neighbors, as we have been where we are, although we don't have a whole lot of neighbors. But, you know, I think, you know, if you were probably to ask our neighbors to the north and south, they don't often hear us go out.
It's because you have the church and the library.
Yeah, but even still.
My house isn't gonna burn down, so I got that going
Yeah,
for
no, but even still,
Our neighbors are
Food pantry.
you know, the positive side is response time is less than a minute. Right now, it's about 6.
Your insurance is going to go way down.
And you usually plowed out earlier, too.
Oh, good point.
Power comes on sooner, right?
Thank you for addressing
So-
my individual concerns.
Before, when you're talking about site work, and you're saying, you know, sometimes you just have an open field and it's easy enough to go. What's involved with the site work on that site? Is there a lot of trees?
So from past testing, and we're pretty comfortable, it's pretty much sand. But obviously, there's contingencies, should we hit a piece of ledge or so forth.
Okay.
But the site work that was done in '08? When were the test pits done? '08. Pretty much, you know, it received, as I understand it, pretty much all the permitting necessary back then, but obviously they've expired. So we kind of have that advantage going into this, that soils are good and so forth.
So aside from clearing trees, what else is involved as far as the site work?
Well, a huge component are the drainage swales that you have. Basically, with today's technology, you're not allowed to just run off into the neighbor's property. You have to take care of your runoff water on site. So those are pretty substantial basins that we're having to excavate to basically create the pools for the water to flow in. You know, for the size of the site, it's roughly a 4-acre site. So that means it's running, you know, just under 200, 150 around there per acre, which that's pretty reasonable in today's, given the fact that you have a leach field. You know, we're not tying into any sort of sewer. There's a leach field that we're building. There's also some considerations with what you do with the water or the wastewater within the bays and stuff. You can't just run those into your septic field, so you're having to create structures, concrete structures, that deal with that contaminated water. So there's a lot of those different components that work into the whole thing. And it's great that we do have sand, because obviously it would be more if we didn't have that going on for us.
Anybody else on the Budget Committee have a question that they would like to ask or further clarification? So what I want to do, we do have a couple people from the community here, so since we have a small group, I want to just open it up briefly if anybody has a comment or a question that they feel would help us in our decision-making. Okay, all right. Thank you very much, gentlemen. We do appreciate your time. We do appreciate you coming with all this information. Is it possible for the Budget Committee, do we want copies of the presentation?
Yes.
Further information that would be useful for us?
Is it already online on that website?
It hasn't been posted.
Not yet, no.
But we can
Well, we can.
We can send it to you by PDF.
post it on the website or.
Post it.
Okay.
Yeah,
Let everybody have it.
Preston, if you can send it to me today, I
Sure.
can get it posted on all the sites and get across, and then get the video blended together
Yeah.
tonight
Yeah.
or tomorrow morning.
Perfect, great.
And again, one more, you know, hit for the website. That really is the key point, and, you know, any of the questions that are popping up, whether it's, you know, you called with a question, I've had a couple of folks call or email directly with questions. We're taking those questions and putting them to the frequently asked questions pages, so that is being updated, and as we're doing it, the most recent question is going to the top. So that, for that reason, so that we can, you know, make sure everybody gets, you know, the opportunity to see what questions are coming out, so.
So my only suggestion is, as you do the presentation on Thursday, I think there's a pretty good consensus in town that the current fire station it needs something. So I think your big challenge is going to be the 5.5 million. So as you do your presentation, I'd focus more on, why do we need what we have in here? What's the complete justification? Because I don't think you're going to see much resistance on, we've outgrown the current location, this will be better, but you're really going to come up against the price tag. That's my only recommendation.
All right, so